Sunday, 31 January. Dearest Suzie, I received another letter from you today. Mail must be getting to us more regularly now. I'm getting along fine, working hard every day. I got paid yesterday, and I went right to the PX and got the last slide projector that they had. It was only $27, and it is a real good one. I like it, and I'm sure you will. Louis Litt is going to Bangkok on the 4th. He took my turn when I decided not to go. Anyway, I'm going to give him enough money to buy a nice sapphire for you. He's not going to have it mounted, though. I figure it is best to send you the stone and let you get it mounted in the States. It shouldn't cost much. Well, February is promotion month. Had you thought of that? We should make CWO on the 13th. Yes, send me Al's hat size. I can get him one of those hats without any trouble. I'll even get all the little crests to go on it, too. That ought to give him something to crow about. Say hello to my boys for me. I miss you all very much. I have just about given up hope of getting a tape from you. I love you all very much. Sincerely, Bill. If you haven't listened to episodes 36 or 37 yet, you'll likely be a bit lost for the rest of today's episode. Long story short, I've split up a piece of writing of mine, and I'm presenting it across a few episodes. I recommend going back and listening to the earlier parts. Anyway, here's Finding My Grief, Part 3. Dad started a business to free up his schedule and help raise us. When Dad was growing up, Poppy was always off fishing, only coming home to bring gifts and beatings. Dad coached baseball teams and drove us to school. Poppy bought expensive things for the boys, even when Mema had to work 2 jobs. Dad would drink a beer or 2 on New Year's. Poppy would spend more time drunk than with his family. What did this all mean to Dad? What did it have to do with what was happening now? We stood there, saying things we never usually say to each other, and haven't even acknowledged since. Maybe Dad didn't say everything he always wanted to say, and maybe he actually said all the things he wished his dad had said to him but now never could. Eventually, the 3 of us returned to the pavilion, hosting the reunion with red, dried eyes and steady breaths. Not much more happened the day of Poppy's funeral. I was young. I moved on. And years later, I realized I didn't really know Poppy personally. By the time I became an adult, I was left with so many what-ifs. I hadn't spent the time talking to him like I should have when I had the chance. The only thing I have left of that day is a few photographs. One in particular shows all of us, sitting in lawn chairs, next to my grandmother, who is holding an oversized and pixelated picture of Poppy. Hey, Mema. I finally mustered up the courage to speak to her about everything one day while visiting her in her trailer before she moved in with my uncle in North Carolina, when she could still comfortably take care of herself. Can you tell me more about Poppy? I realized I never really got to talk to him like I wish I could have. Sure, honey. What do you want to know? I don't know. How did you guys meet? Why did he join the army? What was his favorite book? She sat there, somewhat unresponsive, pretty unwilling to answer. I met him in New Jersey, you know that. Yes, but how? Wasn't he older than you and from Georgia? How would you even come across him? Then she told me the story. One day, long ago, Sue went to New Brunswick with her friend Betty to shop. They were from a small town southwest of the big city comprised mainly of Polish and Hungarian Jews, many of whom had since become Catholic to blend in with their new surroundings and seem more American. Like any other public outing, they wore their best dresses, which were likely handmade since they both came from very poor families, and while waiting at the train station, Betty caught the eye of a young private in the army, a man named Buster. For Buster and Betty, it was love at first sight. Sue, on the other hand, was introduced to his sour-faced, quiet friend, Bill, who was also a private at the time and stationed nearby with Buster. For Bill and Sue, it was contempt at first sight. Bill thought Sue was foolish and immature, while she thought he was standoffish and rude. They were, however, both willing to support their friends and agreed to go on a double date with Betty and Buster, which was the only way Betty's parents would allow her to go out with an older man, especially one in the army. A few nights later, Buster and Bill went to Betty's house to pick up she and Sue. Of course, Betty could not sit next to Buster in the car because that would be inappropriate, so she and Sue were forced to sit in the car's rumble seat, shaking all the way to dinner and risking rain, which would certainly ruin their hair. Soon after the night of the double date, Sue received letters from Bill. He had a hard time showing it, but he actually liked her and wanted her to know it, in his own way, of course. Sue warmed up to him, realizing that he wasn't so bad after all, and quickly recognizing that pursuing a relationship with him was probably her best chance at getting out of her poor, tiny town. Bill quickly climbed the ranks in the army, going from peeling potatoes to help feed refugees in nearby camps, many of whom were from Hungary, which gave him another reason to hate Sue, to getting his GED and qualifying for warrant officer school. This meant he'd head south soon, and wanted Sue to accompany him. They had one speed bump, though. She was underage, and needed parental permission to marry him and start her life. Sue knew she couldn't ask her grandmother, or older sister, or any of the people that actually took care of her. She couldn't ask her mom. It would be impossible to go to the psychiatric hospital upstate on her own, and nothing guaranteed her mom would even sign any papers. So, she reluctantly turned to her dad, having to track him down to one of the many bars he frequented in town. She saw him infrequently, typically only as he stumbled down Main Street. She was embarrassed of him. Who wouldn't be embarrassed to say they're related to the town drunk? She marched in and demanded he sign the paper, mustering up the only courage she had in her body to demand her freedom. He had one question. Will this man take care of you? Will I have to worry about you ever again? Fighting back tears, she replied, No, he will do more for me than you ever could have. Fine, her dad replied, signing the papers and quickly dismissing her. Get going. With that, she packed up her few belongings and headed straight for South Carolina, the only state they could find that would allow them to get married at such a young age. The rest is history. The photo I chose for today depicts someone walking through a rice paddy. It appears to be just off a main road. I'm Alex Lowy, and I hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode of Dearest Suzie, and receiving messages from the past that my Poppy wrote exactly 60 years ago. I sincerely appreciate your time and interest. Please consider following the podcast on your preferred platform, and if you're enjoying it, I kindly ask that you take the time to rate the show and leave a review. Also, please follow the project on YouTube, X, and Instagram. All likes, comments, shares, and reviews will help grow the reach of this story. The links for these things should be in the description of this episode. Please feel free to email me at dearestsuziepodcast@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to say. I'd love to chat or to hear about your stories as well. Thank you for listening, and God bless.